Once upon a time, nestled in the heart of a vibrant, sprawling countryside, there was a little farm owned by a kind old man named Arthur. His farm was famous for many things, but especially for its pumpkin patch. Every year, as autumn painted the leaves in shades of gold and crimson, Arthur's patch would burst with pumpkins of all shapes and sizes. They were round, oval, squat, and tall, each one a perfect shade of orange. This year, however, was different. Among all the ordinary pumpkins, one stood out. It wasn't the biggest or the brightest, but it was special, this particular pumpkin, right from the moment it was a tiny green orb, seemed to have a personality of its own. It grew in a perfect, cheerful round shape, and its vine curled around it like a protective arm. Arthur noticed it right away and gave it a fond pat whenever he passed by. "You're going to be a fine one," he'd chuckle, as the days grew shorter and the air crisper. Something truly magical began to happen. One morning, as the sun's first rays kissed the dew-covered fields, Arthur went to check on his beloved patch. He stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes widening in disbelief. There, on his special pumpkin, were two small, perfectly formed green shoots, looking for all the world like a pair of curious, wide-open eyes. They weren't just shoots. They seemed to see. They followed Arthur as he moved, blinking slowly as if waking from a long slumber. He gently touched one of the leafy eyelids, and the pumpkin seemed to wiggle with delight. Arthur wasn't scared. He was fascinated. He named the pumpkin Pip. Word of the pumpkin with eyes spread like wildfire through the small village. People came from all around to see Pip. Children would gather, telling Pip stories and singing songs. Pip, in return, would watch them, its leafy eyes turning this way and that, sometimes wiggling with what looked like laughter when a particularly funny joke was told. Pip became the heart of the community. One day, a little girl named Lily, who was often too shy to speak, approached Pip alone. She whispered her biggest secret to the pumpkin, that she was afraid of the dark. As she spoke, one of Pip's vine tendrils gently reached out and wrapped around her small hand, as if offering comfort. From that day on, Lily found a newfound courage, and she would visit Pip every day, her best friend, the pumpkin who listened. As Halloween approached, the villagers decided that Pip was too special to be carved into a jack-o'-lantern. Instead, they decorated the area around Pip with fairy lights and colourful ribbons. They placed a small, handcrafted crown of autumn leaves on its head. Pip became the king of their autumn festival. On Halloween night, the entire village gathered around Pip. They didn't tell scary stories. Instead, they shared tales of kindness, friendship, and courage, all inspired by the little pumpkin that grew eyes as the moon shone brightly overhead. Pip's leafy eyes seemed to sparkle with a special light, reflecting the joy and warmth of the community it had brought together. When the first frost of winter finally arrived, Pip's vine began to wither, and its leafy eyes drooped. The villagers were sad, but they weren't heartbroken. They knew Pip's magic wasn't gone. Arthur carefully collected the seeds from inside Pip. He told everyone, "Pip's story isn't over, it's just waiting for the next spring." And he was right. The following year, the pumpkin patch was more magical than ever. Dozens of little pumpkins sprouted, and on several of them, tiny green shoots emerged, looking just like curious, watching eyes. Pip's spirit of wonder and friendship had spread, reminding everyone that magic can be found in the most unexpected places, and that even a small pumpkin can teach a whole village how to see with their hearts. The legend of the pumpkins with eyes lived on, a cherished story passed down through generations, a warm and happy memory of the autumn when their world became a little more magical. Thank you so much for joining me on this wonderful story today. I hope it brought a little bit of magic into your day. Have you ever walked through the woods at dusk and felt like the trees were talking? Not just the rustling of leaves, but a real, hushed conversation just beyond your hearing. That's the feeling you get when you step into Blackwood Forest, or as the locals call it, the Whispering Woods. Tonight, I am going to tell you a story that has been passed down for generations in the small town bordering this very forest. It's the story of Leo and Mia, two curious teenagers who, on a dare one Halloween night, decided to find out if the whispers were real. The legend was simple. On Halloween, the spirits of the woods awaken, and if you listen closely, you can hear them share ancient secrets. But there was a warning, of course, never answer back, and never, ever stray from the path. Leo, a skeptic armed with a flashlight and a smirk, thought it was all nonsense. Mia, while more superstitious, was drawn by the mystery. Her heart a mix of fear and excitement, they entered the woods just as the last sliver of the sun disappeared. Immediately, the air grew colder, and the usual sounds of the forest, the crickets, the owls, fell silent. All they could hear was the crunch of their own footsteps on fallen leaves. At first, there was nothing, see? Just a bunch of spooky old trees, Leo said, his voice a little too loud in the stillness. But then, it started. A faint murmur, like the wind caught in the branches. It grew steadier, weaving in and out of the rustling leaves. It wasn't the wind, it sounded like voices, dozens of them, all whispering at once. The words were indistinct. A jumble of sounds that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Mia gripped Leo's arm. Her eyes wide. Even Leo's confident smile had vanished. This was more than just a spooky story. The whispers swirled around them, pulling at their senses. Mia felt an overwhelming urge to understand what they were saying. It felt important, like a long-forgotten memory trying to surface. She remembered the warning, "Don't stray from the path," but the whispers seemed to be leading her. Deeper, promising answers. That's when Leo made his mistake. Annoyed and trying to be brave, he shouted into the darkness, "Hello, is anyone there? This isn't funny." The moment the words left his lips, a profound silence fell over the woods, not just quiet, but an absolute void of sound. The whispers were gone. A new feeling settled over them. They were being watched. Suddenly, a single, clear voice whispered right beside Leo's ear, "You shouldn't have answered." Panic seized them. They turned and ran. The path they had followed was gone, replaced by an endless maze of identical, looming trees. The whispers returned. But now they were different, mocking, and full of a cold, ancient hunger. They twisted Leo's name, hissing it from the shadows, Liu. They ran for what felt like hours, branches scratching at their faces, the cold seeping into their bones. Every direction looked the same. The whispers were their only companions, growing louder, closer. They were lost. Just as despair began to set in, they saw a faint light flickering ahead. A lantern hanging from the porch of a small, dilapidated cabin they had never seen before. Hope surged, but Mia hesitated. The cabin wasn't on any map. It felt wrong. But the woods felt worse. As they approached, the cabin door creaked open on its own, revealing a warm, inviting glow from a fireplace inside. A kind-looking old woman stood in the doorway, a gentle smile on her face. "You poor children," she said, her voice like honey, coming out of the cold. "You're safe here." Leo, exhausted and terrified, stumbled towards the warmth without a second thought. But Mia noticed something. The woman cast no shadow in the firelight, and behind her, inside the cabin, the patterns on the wallpaper seemed to writhe and shift, forming faces with silent, screaming mouths. The whispers from the woods had stopped, but now a new, single whisper emanated from the cabin itself, a soft, inviting hiss that promised rest, eternal rest. This is where the town's story ends. Leo was never seen again. Mia, however, was found the next morning, Wandering at the edge of the forest, her hair white as snow, unable to speak a single word. She just pointed back towards the woods, her eyes filled with a terror no one could comprehend. So if you ever find yourself near the Whispering Woods, especially on Halloween, listen to the trees. Enjoy their ancient, rustling song, but whatever you do, don't talk back, and if you get lost and see a welcoming light in the darkness, remember, Leo. Sometimes the thing you're running from is far less dangerous than the thing you're running to. Thanks for joining me for this spooky tale. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the shadows. Stay safe out there. And have a very happy Halloween. This one comes from an old high school, a place with long, echoing hallways and secrets whispered between classes. It's the story of room 213, better known as the haunted classroom. Our story begins with four friends: Leo, Maya, Chloe, and Sam. They were typical high school kids, more interested in cracking jokes than studying history. One rainy afternoon, their history teacher, Mr. Harrison, kept them after class for being too disruptive as the final bell rang and the school emptied out. The four of them sat in the eerie silence of room 213. Mr. Harrison, a stern man with a hidden love for local law, decided to share a story instead of giving them extra work. You know, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. This very room has a history. Decades ago, a student named Eleanor spent all her time here. She loved learning more than anything. One evening, she stayed late to finish a project, but she was never seen again. Some say her spirit never left. The friends exchanged skeptical glances. A ghost story? It was probably just a way to scare them into behaving. Once Mr. Harrison finally let them go, Leo, ever the daredevil, smirked. A ghost? I bet she's not so tough. I say we come back tonight and see for ourselves. Maya was hesitant, but the thrill of the idea was too strong to resist. They all agreed to meet at the school's back entrance at midnight. When they returned, the school was a completely different place. It was dark, silent, and imposing. They slipped through a window Leo had unlocked earlier and tiptoed through the shadowy halls until they reached room 213. The air in the room felt heavy and cold. See nothing, Sam whispered, trying to sound brave. Just as he spoke, the classroom door slammed shut with a deafening bang, making them all jump. The lights flickered wildly, then went out, plunging them into absolute darkness. A cold draft swept through the room. Though the windows were sealed shut, Chloe let out a small scream. Suddenly, a faint, chalky scratching sound echoed from the front of the room. They fumbled for their phones, using their flashlights to see. On the blackboard, words were slowly appearing. As if written by an invisible hand. Why are you here? It spelled out. Letter by letter, their blood ran cold. This was real. Leo, trying to regain his composure, called out, "We're sorry, we didn't mean to disturb you." The scratching stopped. A soft, sorrowful sigh seemed to fill the room. The chalk began to move again. Lonely, it wrote. Maya, her voice trembling, spoke up. "Eleanor, you're lonely." The temperature in the room seemed to rise slightly. The chalk scrawled a single word. Yes, they realized Eleanor wasn't a malicious spirit. She was just a lonely soul, trapped in the place she loved most. For the next hour, they talked to her. They asked her about her favorite subjects and what school was like in her time. The chalk would respond, telling them about her love for books and history. It was strange, but it wasn't scary anymore. They were communicating with her. As the first hints of dawn approached, they felt a change in the air. The heavy feeling was gone. On the board, a final message appeared. "Thank you, then." The chalk clattered to the floor. The classroom door creaked open, and the first rays of morning light streamed in. They left the school that morning as different people. They never told anyone what happened, but they always treated room 213 with a quiet respect. Sometimes, on a late afternoon, they'd swear they could feel a gentle, thankful presence in the room, a silent guardian of knowledge. So, what do you think? Just a tall tale, or could a lonely spirit really linger in a place it once loved? Ever feel like some old objects have a memory of their own? Like they've seen things and remember them? I found a mirror like that once, tucked away in the dusty corner of a forgotten antique shop. It wasn't ornate or special, just a simple oval mirror in a dark wooden frame. But the moment I looked into it, I felt a strange pull, a sense of deep history. The shop owner, a woman with eyes that seemed to hold as many stories as her wares, sold it to me for a song. "It's a mirror that remembers," she'd whispered, a cryptic smile on her face. I laughed it off, thinking it was just a sales pitch. I took it home and hung it in my hallway. That's when the strangeness began. At first, it was subtle. A fleeting shadow in the reflection when no one was there. A flicker of movement at the edge of my vision. I blamed it on tired eyes and the play of light. But then, the reflection started to change. One evening, I glanced at the mirror and saw not my own reflection, but a family from what looked like the 1920s. A man in a sharp suit, a woman in a flapper dress, and a small child holding a toy car. They were smiling, posing for a picture that was never taken. It lasted only a second, then they were gone, and my own startled face stared back at me. I was spooked, but also fascinated. I started spending hours just watching the mirror. It became a window into the past. I saw a young couple having their first argument in the 1950s, their faces tense with unspoken words. I saw a teenage girl in the 80s, decked out in neon colors, dancing with wild abandon to music I couldn't hear. I saw moments of joy, of sorrow, of quiet, everyday life. All trapped within the glass. These weren't ghosts in the traditional sense, they weren't trying to communicate or haunt me, they were echoes. Memories imprinted onto the silver, replaying themselves over and over for a new audience. The mirror didn't just reflect the present, it held onto pieces of everyone who had ever looked into it. One night, I woke to a sound from the hallway. I crept out of bed and looked towards the mirror, this time. The reflection was different. It was dark, and a single figure stood there, a woman with long, dark hair covering her face. She wasn't an echo of the past, she was looking *out* of the mirror, directly at me. A chill colder than any I'd ever felt crept down my spine. The air grew heavy, and a profound sadness filled the room. Unlike the other reflections, she didn't vanish. She just stood there, her presence a heavy weight in my home. I saw a tear trace a path down her pale cheek in the reflection. It wasn't a memory, it was a feeling. A deep, inconsolable grief that the mirror had absorbed and was now projecting. She was the reason the shop owner had called it the mirror that remembers. It didn't just remember events, it remembered emotions. I couldn't live with that sorrow. The next day, I carefully took the mirror down. I wrapped it in a thick blanket, as if to muffle its memories. I didn't take it back to the shop or sell it. I couldn't pass that sadness on to someone else. I stored it away in my attic, facing the wall. Sometimes, late at night, I think I can still feel it. A faint echo of that grief, a whisper from the mirror that remembers everything. It reminds me that some objects aren't just objects, they're witnesses. So, gather round, turn down the lights, and listen closely. This is the tale of the forgotten doll. In a dusty attic, filled with the ghosts of memories past, sat a small, porcelain doll. Her name was Lily, though no one had spoken it in decades. She wore a once white lace dress, now the color of old tea, and her glass eyes stared blankly into the darkness, one of them cracked like a frozen spider web. She'd been a gift to a little girl named Clara, a lifetime ago. They were inseparable. Clara would whisper her secrets into Lily's painted ear and host grand tea parties among the sunbeams on the nursery floor. Lily was loved, and she was happy, but as seasons changed, so did Clara. New friends, new games, and new toys pushed Lily further into the background. One day, during a spring cleaning, she was wrapped in newspaper and placed in a box, carried up to the attic. And forgotten. The sunbeams were replaced by shadows, the laughter by the scuttling of spiders. A deep sadness settled within Lily, a coldness that had nothing to do with the winter frost on the attic window. She waited. And waited. Her painted smile never faltered, but inside, a tiny porcelain heart grew heavy with neglect. Decades passed. The house was sold, and a new family moved in. A young girl about the same age Clara had been discovered the attic. Her name was Mia. She was an adventurous child, and the dusty, forgotten space was a treasure trove to her. It wasn't long before she found the old box. Peeling back the brittle newspaper, she gasped. "You're beautiful," Mia whispered, tracing the crack on Lily's glass eye. For the first time in an eternity, Lily felt a warmth spread through her. She was seen. She was remembered. Mia cleaned Lily's dress and carefully brushed the dust from her synthetic hair. She brought her down from the attic and gave her a place of honor on her bedside table. Lily once again listened to secrets whispered in the dark and attended imaginary tea parties. The house was filled with a child's joy, and Lily basked in it. She thought her long wait was finally over. But she was wrong. One evening, as Halloween approached, Mia's grandmother came to visit. She saw the doll on the nightstand and her face went pale. "Where did you find this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Mia proudly explained her attic discovery. The old woman picked up the doll, her hands shaking. "This was mine," she whispered, her eyes welling up. "Her name is Lily. I was Clara." A flood of memories washed over the old woman, memories of a love she had discarded, of a promise she had forgotten. She had meant to come back for Lily, but life had simply gotten in the way. That night, something in the house felt different. A cold draft no one could trace slithered through the hallways. Mia woke up to a faint, tinkling sound, like a tiny music box. She looked at her bedside table. Lily's spot was empty. A trail of dusty footprints, too small to be human, led out of her room and towards the attic stairs. Clara, sleeping in the guest room, also awoke, a profound sense of unease washing over her. She knew Lily was gone. Not forgotten this time, but gone. The doll had waited long enough for a love that had come too late. She had found her own way to leave, returning to the shadows, a silent guardian of the attic, forever a part of the house's whispered history. Some things, once forgotten, don't wish to be found again. Thank you so much for listening to that spooky tale. I hope it gave you a little chill for the season. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Let me know in the comments what you think happened to Lily. Stay safe. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.